Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being us, for being healing, for being the healing process, for being the bridge between the absolute and the relative, for being our ancestors and their role in the physical form, for being the elements and their role in the physical form. Thank you for being the flow of intelligence, concise, precise, efficient, supportive in every way, aligned with Dharma in every way. May everyone attending this energy healing session and live in real time, and those who will enjoy witnessing it not in real time, may increase and expand their own understanding and capabilities in the field of energy healing. And may we all rise to become self-sufficient and very powerful and able to do what we need to do in order to perpetuate a world and a life for ourselves and for all others, which is worth living, which is aligned with cosmic evolution, and which is a truly a gift to every creature, every particle of creation. Thank you. All right, everybody, thank you for being with me. So grateful to have you all here. Today we have the topic of the immune system, which is the part of our physiologies that's responsible for healing. So it kind of makes sense to do a webinar on that topic. And of course, energy healing itself, this is going to be the overview of what is energy healing. Energy healing itself is the process, or we could say the technology. It's like a combined technology. What we're doing is we're combining the technologies of consciousness and the technologies that are leveraged for evolution of consciousness and putting that together with the healing process. Really, that's what we're doing. Really, that's what energy healing is. It's like, we could say it's a combination of technologies for evolution and technologies for healing. And it's really beautiful to put these two elements together, because healing, the need for healing comes up when there is suffering. And it's very difficult sometimes to see suffering in terms of its innate value. But when we put it together with the technologies of expansion of consciousness and evolution, then a new light shines on the experiences that we have with our health, and of course other situations like relationships and manifestation, all the different areas that we look at, spirituality. Yeah, shining a deeper, brighter, bigger light on those topics. And what that does is it enhances the ability to affect positive change in the outcome of situations with consciousness. So consciousness is the tool. Consciousness is the implement. Awareness, we can say awareness is the implement of the energy healer. You are all energy healers. Anybody who heals, that's everybody, is an energy healer essentially. But generally what happens is the healing process is left as kind of a mystery, right? There are certain parts of it that can be described and explained from a superficial physical perspective, but so much of what happens in healing is not physical. So much is much deeper than that. It's on the level of consciousness itself. And so what we're doing in energy healing is we're diving into those deeper mechanics and using our awareness to shine a light that reveals those mechanics so that we truly understand how they work and why they work and how we can reproduce the positive effects over and over consistently. This is the purpose of energy healing. It's sort of rising up to be a dependable, consistent, and powerful way to produce health, to promote health in the physiology. And that doesn't mean that sometimes you'll do some big energy healing and then you'll find yourself in the hands of a very capable massage therapist or chiropractor or medical doctor who can then bring in at the gross material level some precise herbalist maybe who can bring in just that physical material element that acts as the material representation of the inner work. But we all know that if the inner work isn't done, the people who work at a more physical material level of the body, sometimes their work is consistent and sometimes it's not. And so really energy healing acts as an augmentation to having a healthy diet and doing all the things at the surface that should work. You know, what's the difference between when you do everything right and it doesn't work, and you do everything right and it does work? Well, the difference is what's going on the level of consciousness. So this is what we're doing in energy healing. We're getting into that finer, deeper, more profound level, which is the fundamental or the underlying principle behind the healing that takes place at the grosser, more manifest levels. And we're understanding and developing and evolving our own ability to work at that fine level, to move energy, to move consciousness, so that healing happens with grace and success every time, consistently. And a lot of times, if a person is connected in enough with those fine levels, the gross level doesn't even have to happen. I've seen lots of really beautiful, amazing, miraculous healings for people when they weren't taking anything else. They were just using consciousness alone. It's all good. It just depends on the particular situation and the time, and one's belief systems have a lot to do with it. Sometimes it just helps. It helps to have a little something. Oh, look, I have a little crystal. Sometimes it helps just to have a little something there at the surface that sort of represents the work that you've done. All right. So that's the overview of what's energy healing. Thanks for being with me for that. Yesterday, now we do the review of yesterday. The healing session that we're in this time is about the immune system. And the immune system, I did a little overview of the immune system yesterday, and we did some healings for the 3 different areas of immune system function. And those include, the first part is the body's ability to sort of repel invaders or pathogens. They're called pathogens. The body's ability to just naturally be sort of immune to pathogens. That's the first. The second part is, if the first part fails, then step 2 is seeking out. We have cells in our body that seek out and identify pathogens within the system, within the plasma in the body. And that's point number 2. So there's a kind of a wisdom basis. There's a wisdom base and even an archive in the body associated with that second step, because once a pathogen has been identified in the physiology, records are kept. There are record keeper cells that will maintain that record of the DNA, some little particle or piece of the DNA of the original pathogen, so that the body will always be prepared henceforth in the future with the appropriate antigens to address that. And then the third section, here we go. There's a third section right there. The third section is if the first line of approaching the pathogen in the plasma is unsuccessful, and if the pathogen manages to get inside the cell, because that's what a lot of pathogens do, is they actually get inside our cells. And inside the cell is an environment that's somehow safe and comfortable for the pathogen and allows it to reproduce wildly. So certain cells become like little wombs for viruses and bacterias. And because the pathogen is inside the cell, the cells that seek out pathogens can't find it because it's inside another cell. And so in there, the pathogen is safe and it reproduces, and then it comes bursting out into the system, and then we have a problem. So the last step is to destroy the pathogen. There's a lot of structures. There's structures in our immune system, cells in our immune system that are specifically designed to destroy pathogens. So either we repel them, we try to avoid them, or if they get into the system, we get wise and we check them out and we understand them. And then we bring up the energies that help eliminate them. 3 things. All right, so we kind of did healings for all 3 of those, including a nice healing for the bones, which is the bones are the source of all the elements of the blood, as well as other important elements in our bodies like enzymes and hormones. And of course, all the elements that we need. They're a storehouse for the elements. But most importantly, in this case, the bones provide blood cells. So we did a healing for the bones. We also did a healing at the end for the body's ability to eliminate toxins such as mold and mercury and other types of toxins that can get in the system. We also did a healing for ancestors, particularly for the father's line of ancestors. Anyway, that's the overview of yesterday. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have a lot of questions that came in, and I only got to really answer one yesterday. So I'd like to dive in today. The reason I'm doing that is because these questions, excuse me, little mucus there, little mucus doing the throwing off the pathogens. A thought came up for this lady that the immune system really is the body's first defense, or is the emotional body the body's first defense? Good question. And the reason is that it seems that anyone who's very sensitive, and I know there are a lot of very sensitive people in our group, that makes you empathetic and it makes you a good healer also. But people who are sensitive, that when the emotional body is in turmoil, it frequently results in some physiological imbalance as well. And that is so true. The body starts to feel compromised. So that's the basic question. And yesterday what we did also, there was also a healing in there for the astral body, because I also think of the astral body as one of the body's first line of defense, because energetically, that's the level of ourself where we're kind of interfacing with our environment at an energetic level. But if we look at our Ham bubble diagram, and we see that the astral body is the densest of the subtle levels of the physiology, and then we see that the emotional body is the subtlest of the dense levels of physiology, we can see that the relationship between the astral body and the emotional body is key to providing some energetic support for the system so that we don't get shaken or thrown off guard or depleted. I feel that the reason people often will get sick, especially after they've been through some type of trauma, is because the energy reserves are depleted. They've been focusing into the emotional situation. And we tend in our culture and our society to discount a little bit. The subtler traumas, it's pretty obvious. If someone gets a physical hurt of some kind, then we say, oh, this poor person, they're dealing with that trauma. But it's a little harder to measure emotional traumas. However, it's fairly common for people to get a chest cold or to get some kind of infection in the chest after they've lost someone they love, after a death of someone who's close to them. That is very, very common. And it's partly because the grief gets stuck up in this part of the physiology. The other reason is that the passage of a soul across the veil from the human condition to the spirit world is not a small deal. It's a big deal, and it requires support. So when a person's born, we call that support labor. When a person dies, we call it grieving. But in the case of labor, the mother, and I just say this from my own experience and bowing down with all reverence and gratitude to the other mothers in the audience, we know that the mother's soul has to reach across the veil and escort the child into this world. That's why it takes hours. That's why it's so intense. That's why her body creates so many neurochemicals that support the ability to dislodge a little bit from the physical material level of experience and be in that more ethereal level of experience so that she can make that move. It's a very delicate and important, essential move. You know, obviously there's also the physical element to it, but the important thing is the mother's commitment to the life of that child, that she would step into her own unknown and escort baby into this world. So the same thing happens when people die, but so little is really fully understood or appreciated in our culture about death. And as a result, we never talk about that. It's not even in childbirth, we basically never talk about it. In childbirth, the medical establishment talks about the birthing process and the physicality of it. And you will rarely, only if you're going to like really spiritual midwives, you know, will you find a midwife who's willing to talk about that side of the birthing process. Same with death. The soul needs to be escorted. There's an element of escort that takes place. There's an element of feeling their loss from this world, acknowledging, recognizing, and honoring that soul's loss from this earthly plane. And it's usually experienced by a kind of work. It's an emotional work of grieving. Somebody has to do it. So we take turns. Anyway, it's hard work and it's depleting. And when the body's been depleted emotionally, then the immune system doesn't tend to respond as quickly. It doesn't have that robust energy behind it that it would when a person's feeling, you know, mostly strong and well. And so we can say that, yes, the emotional body is, in a sense, is part of our first line of defense against imbalances. And absolutely, absolutely, individuals who are a little more emotionally stable and have in their astral bodies, they have set up scaffolding, because the astral body, as we know, is that field that's like threads of consciousness. So the scaffolding is set up in such a way that it's extremely stable. And that means belief systems and understandings about oneself and about reality are such that even when really challenging situations arise, like say, you know, challenges with difficult relationships or the death of a loved one or having to navigate one's way through some really heavy-duty old karma. That's another kind of very challenging situation that can be very depleting. That if you've got your toolkit in hand, and when I say that, I mean, I'm referring essentially to the principles of energy healing. The principles of energy healing, as we all know, those of you who've been with me for a long time now, we've worked through those subtle layers of the physiology, those deep, deep inner layers of the physiology in such a way that everything is in order. And when everything is in order in the astral and causal bodies, then when that old karma comes to town to hit, the individual is able to self-position in such a way as to leverage that karma so that it supports evolution rather than breaking the system down. And when one navigates the karma in that particular way, and we can say that loss of a loved one would also be karma, and we can say that problems with relationships could also be karma, right? So it does tie in, this does tie in with the planets. So bowing down with reverence to the Jyotishis in the audience, who I adore very much, and had given me this beautiful example that the quality of life that an individual leads influences very much the way the karma in their chart manifests. The planets represent our karma. They kind of spell it out. They describe it and they show, you know, when certain types of karma are going to come and visit at what times and so forth, kind of like a little roadmap into our own future. So, and past, and to understand our own past. And one example is that the 12th house is the house of ashrams, prisons, and hospitals. So if a person has some karma coming to them from a planet, say in the 12th house, then depending on the quality of being, whether that person is a very sattvic person, which means like a pure person, or if they're more of a rajasic person, or if they're more of a tamasic person, this will determine whether that karma coming from the 12th house will come in the form of, if they're tamasic, it could come in the form of imprisonment, which is very, very, very unpleasant. But if they're rajasic, it could come in the form of a hospitalization, which, like a prison, it keeps you out of activity, right? Or like an ashram, if they're a sattvic person, it's like being in the ashram, where they have to be so disciplined and so on the program, and they can't engage in a lot of worldly fun things, happy schmappy things. They have to kind of stay focused all the time like that and stay inward. If the soul is a sattvic soul, they at least get the chance to have some autonomy over their choices. So you can have 3 different people with the same affliction, and their being ends up, their life story ends up going 3 different directions. So when I say, how do we handle karma, karmic returns, this is what I'm referring to, is how do we set ourselves up so that the inner constructs of self are so well organized that when the karmic return comes, the result is that we handle it with grace and success. And as you know, being in the ashram is an extremely spiritually powerful location. Being in the ashram, when I say the ashram, it's like the monastery, or being in the church, if you want to think of it that way, being in the church, that we're in that holy sacred ground. So in the holy sacred ground, there's a lot of things that you don't do, right? You have to maintain reverence for the depth of that. This information being received by the astral and causal levels of the physiology, this is the healing. The causal body particularly, I'm seeing, it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting what I'm seeing happening. And I bow down to all of you because it's so exquisite when we're in these sessions, all the new information that comes out. But the causal body, as you know, it has this tide that rolls back and forth between the whole causal body and then all the regions of the causal body. And depending on how much awareness, clear, lucid awareness, is at the causal level of self, will determine how much access we have to the potential that's at the causal level of the physiology. Causal body is where we access our potential. And there's infinite potential in the absolute. But if the awareness is just kind of foggy and sort of only sort of seeing the bare outlines of what's going on down there, what happens is wholeness. And then when it comes down to the parts, we tend to see 3 parts. 3, it's simple, but we see it in terms of 3. Now, if we were looking at the causal, if we were viewing, if our point of perspective was, say, some kind of godly point of perspective, then we would see the wholeness. And when it goes down to its parts, we'd see millions and billions and trillions of little parts. But the 3 would be contained in all those millions of billions of trillions, because the 3 is like a fundamental. Well, there's another fundamental, it's 5. There's a 5 fundamental, and it correlates with 5 senses, 5 elements, etc. And so what I'm seeing happening in the causal field is that this element that I would associate with earth energy. And of course, we're working a lot with earth energy in this particular healing set, because the immune system is a physiological manifestation. It's a material manifestation. And our bodies are more than 50% earth element. So we're working with the earth element here. And the beauty of the earth element is that it's very stable and strong. And so what I was seeing happening is the quality of purity The quality of purity that sets those individuals who navigate their karma effectively and successfully apart from those individuals who get slapped upside the head has to do with how much purity is integrated. And the purity element, I'm seeing it together with the earth element, which is stable. So what that means is the purity is being at the causal level, which is where we structure the material. Everything that structures up at the material has its foundation at the finest manifest level of self. That down at that level, these are coming together. That the earth element is coming together with the purity element, so that the actions that make their way out to the surface of behavior align with the quality of purity. Right? So the karma comes, something comes, maybe you lose something or something, but then how do you handle that process? How do you handle the losing of something? Well, there are different ways. You could lose your temper. You could cry, or you could become afraid that somehow things are going to go very bad. Now you're going to lose something else. I lost one thing. I guess I'm going to lose everything. Or, right? There are all different ways of handling that situation. Or the purity element, which is that when you're in the ashram, naturally letting go is part of the spiritual process. And we enjoy and embrace doing so in a way which is aligned with Dharma. That means we don't let go to the point of self-sacrifice and damaging or hurting ourselves, but we do let go what needs to be let go so that progress forward in the expansion of consciousness, the process of expanding consciousness, is able to happen gracefully and successfully. Downsizing. Downsizing feels so good. This is purity conjoining with the earth element so that it has free reign. It is allowed to move all the way to the surface of expression flawlessly, gracefully, in a blessed and sacred manner. And what I'm seeing with this is the most tremendous and beautiful flow of love. Evidently, we're going into the field of purity here. Evidently, part of the story of purity is purity of the heart. And it's a great purification for the heart, for everyone. It looks like our healing collective. In our healing collective, we know that when our healing collective makes a step like this, of this accelerated expression and expansion of the capacity to love with extreme purity, extremely innocent, sweet, unrestrained or unconditional quality of love, that we're upgrading our entire healing collective. I'm just watching it, stabilizing. It's very, very interesting. It's very interesting because it's affecting the circulatory system. Oh, luckily the circulatory system is part of the immune system. And of course, we were supposed to be talking about the immune system today. But one of the ways that the immune system works is that the heart sets up the beat, and then the arteries and the veins actually, within themselves, they have their own internal beat that actually helps to perpetuate the flow of blood through the body. And that condensing, when it condenses, that's like a move toward the earth element, because each of the elements they go in order, starting with space being the most abstract and the least dense, then air, then fire, then water, then earth. So earth is the most dense. So any move that has a contracting quality to it and pressing the material, in this case the material of consciousness, into a more compactified form, is moving in the direction of earth element. Strengthening earth element in the body. The immune system cells are expressions of earth. All the cells, all the physical material cells are mostly expressing earth element. And the bones, think of it, they come from the bones that are stronger than steel. I mean, they're not stronger than steel, but pound for pound, they actually are stronger than steel. I learned that this week on the internet. So they're small. Our bones are kind of small. You know, you get a steel beam, it's like this big and that long. And so the pound for pound, bones are pretty amazing. But they're quite earthy elements, aren't they? They're quite solid. And here's the beauty, is that, and I wasn't sure how this download, which came to me earlier in the week, was going to tie in, but the stones in our world, you know, I don't always have stones with me, just saying. I don't always have these beautiful things with me when I'm doing these talks, but the stones of our world are very pure expressions of the earth element. Are they not so innocent, right? They never like do things like, they get to be in the ashram all the time. So yeah, the stones are very pure and they have great wisdom in them and they have tremendously long memories. Our stones hold memories that go back millions, hundreds of millions of years. And the wisdom of the stones exists on the level of consciousness and is accessible to us through our own processing of the elements of the earth. The basic elements, the same elements that the stones are made out of. A lot of the same elements, carbon, calcium. There's lots of elements. I know I've got scientists in the audience. They probably know more of the names, magnesium, and there's so the same materials really. And through those materials are like the atomic communicators. They're like the part of the communication system that our physical body is involved with all the time. As are the immune system cells are also physical communicators, but those are living cells. But the elements are there to support the stabilization of our own wisdom and understanding of our physiologies in terms of the earth element. This is shells. Oh yeah, definitely shells fit in with stones too. Nice question up there in the chat window. This is very important as part of setting up our scaffolding so that our immune systems function more efficiently. And that is that we tend to drive our bodies the way we drive a car, right? It's just like, okay, this convenient thing, I need to go here, I need to go there. We're not thinking about, oh, my beautiful car, oh, my precious car, like, what can I do today to make my car feel better? You know, very few people think that, right? It's all just like, come on, let's get up, we got to get up, we got to go, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got it, right? And we're running our physiologies like that most of the time. Most people are running it most of the time like that. And part of the reason is because of the earth element. The being in the body knows itself to be made of consciousness. But the body is so physical. It seems like a vehicle. It seems like just a thing, that it's a living thing. It's not just a thing. It's a nice living thing. And of course, we love ourselves, but there are the associations that we have with the karmas that we face and sufferings, like experiences of physical pain, and so also physical pleasure can be experienced with the body, but a lot of the elements of ourself that we don't necessarily cherish tend to get associated with the physical structure. They tend to be, there's a certain amount of criticism that ends up going to the body, yeah? This changes. This needs to change. It's time for this to change because the body is actually our piece of divinity. It's our own precious expression of wholeness. Wholeness is found in every system, in every cell, in every part of the body. It really is not just a vehicle, and it really isn't the source of the problems. The body is absolutely divine. And balance, we did a little bit on this yesterday, but I want to do a little bit more today, because when we can strike a balance between our assumptions and judgments and expectations and feelings about the body, and our assumptions, judgments, and expectations and feelings about our own divine origins, we can integrate the body with that. And this integration, this connection, opens the body's full potential, its physical full potential. I'm actually noticing the parts of the body, the bones especially, their connection to cosmic information, cosmic reality. It's a little bit of a teaser for the next webinar, I guess. But it's important for us to have a strong immune system as well, because the bones tend to be the origins of the components of the immune system. Right there. I'm feeling waves of light medicine produced in the heart region are washing through the essential organs of the immune system. That's the thymus, the spleen, and the bones, the skeletal system. This upgrade for the skeletal system is going to support everybody's ability to have stronger, more robust bones, as well as help to heal for teeth, help healings for teeth. Because what's happening is they're receiving the information from the stones. And the stones really, really understand about hardness. They really understand how to be hard and yet to be a living force at the same time, which is what our body has the capability of doing. This is the growth of physical capability. It is the crystallization of the wisdom of the stones for the hardest portions of our body. It's like going into, for example, there's a range of different types of tissues in the body, right? From very dense to very abstract. And you could say, well, the light that shines from a person's eyes, that's very abstract aspect of the physiology. But the bones is a very dense aspect of the physiology. So we're starting at the densest level and raising it up to its divine status. Just watching it move, man, watching that energy, watching the transformation taking place. You guys are doing a great job. I'm actually feeling the turning and a great activation of energy in the solar plexus at the same time. So we're just letting that, it's turning into a great, big, 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 big wave that's rolling through the entire collective of our group to strengthen bones, strengthen teeth, to support the divine expression of the hardest tissues in the physiology. Good job. I promised I'd get to some more questions. So even though that's continuing to roll, just saying it's continuing to roll out, I would like to go to another question. So this is a very powerful and spiritual woman from Europe who asked the question, I wonder why some people struggle with frequent colds and coughs, etc., and take weeks and weeks to throw them off, yet others just take a few days. And I think we kind of covered this a little bit in the last point about the different types of ways that the physiology handles karma. But, she's pointing out also that the children, she has little grandchildren, and that they've had this cold for like 3 weeks now. And, you don't think of little children as being very tamasic, living tamasic quality of lifestyle, but you have to understand that the karma that children endure is associated with mother in ages 1 to 4, and then with father ages 4 to 8. And then it isn't until about age 8 to 12 that the karma is associated with their own past lives, on past life karma. And then from there, it's like accruing new. After age 12, about the time they go through puberty, then they're kind of working at their own process. So when the child has the cold, a little child between, say, ages of 1 and 4 has a cold that goes on and on, who suffers? Who has to deal with that? Its mom has to deal with that. So it's the same thing. Really, she was saying, well, how come she was sending a lot of loving energy toward the grandchildren and trying to figure out how to support them through energy healing to heal more quickly. And what I realize is the healing energies have to go to the parents. That's why. Origins of the challenge. Origins of the challenge. The children are taking it on their physiologies, but really, and I'm just feeling a little shift going on there. Just a little little shift of attention, little shift of the healing energies going more to the parents to address it as a karma on the parents, from the parents' side. And then that really helps the children. It's going to help. You'll see, they'll get over their colds really quickly. Just allowing that. And while we're doing that, let's go ahead and, as I'm looking into our collective, our healing collective, let's go ahead and use the same energies to support ourselves, because we know that all of us as children went through periods of illness, and those periods of illness left what, of course, they upgraded the intelligence of the immune system at the time. So we now have antigens in our body that wouldn't be there if we hadn't been sick as little kids. But what we can do is we can support a healing in our own relationship with our own parents during those early years from 1 to 8 years old, anytime we went through a period of a very long and involved illness, or even a cold that lasted for 3 weeks, or a flu or something. So, and this is leveraging the healing for the heart that just took place. It's opening the heart. And there's a flow of deepest reverence and love for the parents, that we were the instruments of their karma. And at the same time, it made us strong. And a download is coming in for everyone that solidifies the reality that we came to this world to help our parents. Children come to the world to help their parents. It's just natural. Lots of forgiveness is flowing. And the forgiveness upgrades the immune system, upgrades the entire structure of the soul. The forgiveness, it comes from this causal level of creation, right? So it's part of the scaffolding of the foundation. And as that happens, it upgrades the purity aspect of the self. And it's beautiful to do this for ourselves as children. That means the divine presence of self in the present is moving back through time, and it's affecting a healing for ourselves as children, ages 1 to 8. But as it does that, what it also does is it integrates and stabilizes our own purity at that early age, so that will form a foundation as we move into this time that we're in now. So we're really going back in time, and we're making a little adjustment that helps increase our ability to maintain a stability of sweetness and sattva and goodness now and into the future. This is so interesting. It's so interesting. I love looking into the group. I love looking into our healing collective. And what I see is so very interesting. I'm seeing a healing for long periods in history where certain groups conquered other groups. That's what I'm seeing. Long period in history, because what I'm seeing, and this actually ties into another question coming up, which is about how sometimes, oh no, actually it's the same question from Scotland, I think, that sometimes an illness will come in and it'll affect like a whole huge group of people. Oh, we're just still on the same question, I guess, huh? Yeah, she said sometimes, what is that? When an illness will come, or why hundreds of people in an area can sometimes get sick all at the same time. And that's like, is it like some kind of mass clearing of karma? Yes, it is some kind of mass clearing of karma, or something, or just a whole huge group of opportunistic energies, like the pathogens are kind of like exploitative, opportunistic energies. The answer is, if we look at, for instance, back in like the 16, 17, 1800s, when conquering groups would come in and they would bring diseases, to people of another continent, so that those people hadn't built up antigens, and they hadn't built up an immune ability to defend themselves against those illnesses like smallpox. This is what I'm seeing. We're doing a healing for these events. It's not so very unlike when the child falls ill on the parent's karma. It's not so much unlike that. But there is a collective choice. But there's also like a collective wound that's left from these events. And this is what we're addressing. We're using ourselves, our little healing collective, which is like about 100 people. We're putting ourselves together, having just received this download and stabilized it and healed ourselves as children. And now we're able to leverage that skill, which we've just created. It's like upgrading your immune system, right? Your immune system deals with something, and then it's like, okay, now I can deal with that. Now what's happening is it's turning around and being offered out to the collective. And it really, in many ways, it is the same thing. That the tribal peoples were living very close to natural law, living in a very kind of rich spiritual traditions. And so there was a lot of purity there. In some ways, there was a lot of purity. Maybe other ways, not so much. But the groups with the higher technology came in and are kind of like parents to children. Parents kind of have higher technology, essentially. Parents can drive and cook and do all kinds of things with technology little kids can't do, right? So they come in with their higher technology and they kind of take over the show. They're like, I'm in charge now. It's clearing. Again, I'm feeling a big activation in the solar plexus area, the physiology. We can think of that as our power center. So the power center of our collective, our healing collective, is able to address the use of biochemical warfare. That goes all the way back. It goes back to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan's group were responsible for the plague. It started in the ranks of his armies. And then the bodies of the dead soldiers became the weapons. They didn't have to send bombs. They didn't have to catapult rocks over the walls of the city. They just had catapulted the dead bodies of the guys who were all sick, and then everybody in the city got sick. That's how they did that. That was when it was first discovered. So we're kind of going way back in time. Way back in time. This is how we heal ourselves, and this is how we set the stage for our world to evolve out of the mess that it's in. We have to go back and heal the messes that were made centuries ago and have been left and are still messes today. So that's why we're doing this. You think, now wait a minute, wasn't this about the immune system? But the thing is that it all ties together, and it's very important. The work that we do in these energy healing webinars is far and beyond just the healings that we do for ourselves. And you all know that as we do this work, it shifts our personal karma as well. So in the overall, the upgrade for the immune system is still served by healing, starting with the oldest known events. And I can go back, and we can go back and check the annals of history, but we're going back at least until the time of Genghis Khan to heal the damage. We're doing damage control, essentially, which is what that, let's see, that's what the third section of our immune system does, right? Last night we worked a lot with the first two sections, the one that just deflects negativity and the one that goes in and finds out what's going on. But now we're looking at the last one. We're really working with this last and third section of our immune capacity, which is to when a problem has already cropped up. And obviously this one cropped up a long time ago at a culture, at a sort of collective level of our world consciousness. It is being identified. There's some more clarity is coming in on it. We're having to do a big clearing of malevolent and exploitative, I'd say sinister intent. And we're separating, we're quarantining those darker energies, those malevolent energies, from the structures of self, which are divine, such as the physical form. We're helping see part of the reason that it hasn't been cleaned up energetically over all these centuries is when people look into those fine structures of creation, it just looks like a big mess. It looks like a big foggy field or something. And what happens is the energies, which like the malevolent energies, that sinister intent, did I use that word? Something like that. When it goes in, it's designed to self-perpetuate. It wants to live, it wants to do its thing, it wants to create or wreak whatever havoc it can wreak on our world. And so as a result, it camouflages itself. It fools us. And it will yoke itself to something substantial and basic, of which we cannot separate, such as our physical forms. Then we start to be resentful about our bodies and find fault in our bodies and look with judgment and so forth on that which is actually divine in nature. This is shifting. We're shifting out the illusion from the truth. And we're also allowing nature, allowing our divine level of self, that deep silent source of creation, to bring in the interference patterns that are necessary to balance the malevolent energies that are part of this picture. And those malevolent energies are based on greed, essentially. Mostly greed, I think, lust for power, greed and lust for power, those two. Fear, there's a lot of fear, but the fear is part of the illusory element. So those, that idea of lack, like the idea of, I'm not going to have enough unless I take something from the next guy, right? No. So it doesn't have to. Infinite. There's infinite potential and infinite good in creation. Just letting the energy move. The energy's moving deep, deep up from the earth. And I'm feeling a kind of an upward flow, an upward rising of pure or sattvic energy. Sattvic, that means pure, rising up from in the earth. That means it's coming originally from a source of infinity in the center of creation, the center of our universe, and it's coming up through our bodies. It's engaging with our body's energy field, but it's also engaging, it's communicating a lot of wisdom to our bodies physically as well, of how a group of 100, 108, I'm sure we have about 108 here today, at least, how a group of 108 can promote a flow of creative intelligence that turns the tide of the mess that's been made over the centuries with biological warfare. Part of that story is seeing the divine in everything and everyone, even the infectious, even the bacterias and the viruses that are there that infect people. Clearly, at some point, the Europeans, here's another example, at some point the Europeans, their physiologies came into harmony with the energies of smallpox, so smallpox couldn't take them out anymore. They became immune. Somewhere along the line, their bodies, doesn't mean their bodies weren't living with smallpox. They're still carriers. But, but the American Indians had not ever been exposed to smallpox. Their bodies had not produced, did not have record of those particular pathogens, and therefore record of the antigens to address them. And as a result, died in large numbers. So part of the story is learning to work harmoniously with all the living things, and also how to address them in a gentle and respectful manner. And this leads me to yet another question. Actually, oh boy, I was only going to do questions. Actually, I've still got a bunch of questions, and I was having the thought, wouldn't it be nice to run everybody through the energy healing for dealing with infections? But that is a freebie on my website in my knowledge base. Maybe we can add that. We'll add that link when we send out the recordings of today's session. I'm looking in here. Okay, so here's a lady. She says she's got a lot of things in storage. Oh, hello, I didn't know you were here. She has a lot of things in storage for about 3 years, and when it got delivered to her new home, yay, she's got a new home, unfortunately full of mold, and has been really difficult to get the spores out of the home. Also because she has a friend who's helping her. His car has been now contaminated as well. So it's an ongoing issue. Because then everything that goes to his car, and although all these things have been thrown out and the whole house cleaned several times. Yeah, so let's talk about mold. We also did a fairly good healing for mold yesterday, but again, the situation here is that if you want to invite a living presence out of your space, you need its cooperation. So part of the story is settling awareness down and getting past the fear. Because when the fear kicks in, it kicks on the sympathetic nervous system, and the response can often be just like, oh my God, we just have to get rid of everything like that, which you did, which, was probably, at least, hopefully you were able to do that from that kind of ashram perspective of just letting go and knowing, well, it's my new house, so it's going to have all new things in it. And that's going to be really nice to have lots of new things. And they don't carry any of the old energies, which is good. But as for the mold itself and the spores, the mold spores themselves, it's important to locate their life force, energetic signature of the life force of the spores. Not so different from getting rid of a virus, right? If the virus is in the body, it's in the cells, then we have to locate that life force first. Once the life force, and I'm just using my attention we just focus the attention in on the mold. So feeling the energy signature of the mold, And I'm taking a read on that energy signature. And what I see are kind of dense patterns, old patterns of looking at the glass half empty, kind of, seeing the world in a sort of a darker light, so to say. And old patterns that get carried generation to generation and end up not being addressed over the course of time. So they end up being like unprocessed emotions associated with the mold. So what we're doing is a new seed will yield a new crop. And this is probably the best, as I'm offering the vision of it into being, what I'm seeing is bringing in the second element. There are qualities of the light of consciousness that naturally, innocently, and spontaneously flush out old energies, that flush out, it's like a kind of energetic detritus or something, that flush out this old deteriorating energies. And, it's possible that at certain times, and this kind of ties back into our big healing for biological warfare, that at times in history, what was appropriate, what was considered socially appropriate by the collective, was for one culture that had more technology to go in and destroy another culture. Genocide. That was considered appropriate. And I think we made some reference to that last night, because there's still some countries on earth right now that are not being very nice to their citizens. So these are the type of old beliefs that are no longer and will no longer be relevant into the future. We do not want to carry them into the future, just like you do not want to carry those mold spores into the future of your time in that house. So the light of being is able to rise up in a way. Oh, and I kind of thought something like this was going to happen earlier. There was a big, really huge loving upgrade in the heart earlier, where as a collective, our hearts upgraded. And that is being used in conjunction with wisdom to support the ability to very, very quickly create a harmonious relationship with all the beings, so that there is a fine flow of clear communication. Just as if a creature gets into your house that shouldn't be living there, the mold is like that. And it is possible to communicate with these beings and ask them to leave. It is possible. It's also possible for your friend to set up a condition in his car, being that it's outside, that is not favorable for the mold. The mold is able to grow and perpetuate itself in an enclosed space, in a quiet, enclosed, slightly damp space that allows the mold, ideal for the growth of the mold. But a car that moves around outside and has sunshine shining into it and has air flowing through it on a consistent basis is not going to be an ideal environment for mold. So the mold, it's good. We're not in the habit of communicating or thinking that we have the potential to communicate with structures in our environment that don't have vocal mechanisms. But the truth is that we communicate with everything in the environment, including rocks. Yeah, right? Including rocks and mold and bacterias and everything. And so we communicate through our hearts, because the heart speaks the universal language of feeling. And that universal language can go, and you can step up to the mold and say, I realize that you've been part of this world for some time, but now it's not appropriate for you to be in this space. This space isn't designed for you. It's not conducive to your welfare or your growth. And so it's time to leave. And you'll see that as the mold starts to move out, as you move it out, you actually are restructuring your own belief systems and understandings and abilities to deal with problems, because these are where the old energies got stuck. How do we deal with problems? I'm going to move this over. Anyway, I hope that helps. There are interference patterns that can be created on the level of consciousness that perfectly counteract the energy signature of the mold. You can create these. They're created at the causal level of the physiology, and they tend to sort of gel or stabilize in the heart area. And then from the heart area, they come through with your intention. And when you speak from the heart's intelligence, its feeling intelligence to the mold, what you're really doing is you're communicating the interference pattern that disallows that life force pattern of the mold to stick around. That's the mechanics. That's the inside mechanics.
Like a matrix interference?
You can, it's probably, I would expect that it's possible to produce something that's like a matrix. I think of a matrix as produced from the threads of the astral body, and it's a very stable form. And it may be absolutely necessary to put a matrix that's got the interference pattern for the mold in your friend's car, and you can go send it over to the storage unit too, if that helps. Put it on your house too. And what the matrix is it's a structure comprised of astral filaments, because the astral field, the web of life, is made of these threads of consciousness, and that each place that the filaments cross each other, there's an energetic structure, and that energetic structure is the interference pattern. So what you do is you create this like really, nice, stable, symmetrical construct of astral threads where every node has a little message for the mold. Oh, this isn't a good place for you to live. You don't want to live here. No good.
That would work with like a fungus too, like you've got a toenail fungus or something.
That would work for funguses as well, yes. Yes, make a small one that goes over the toe. And I would say if you've got something in the physiology like a fungus on the toe or something like that, definitely use your hand chakras as well, because the hand chakras, and intelligence starts at the heart, but it comes right down the arm and out the palms of the hands. And so you can directly target, like a laser-like targeting of the interference pattern for that particular energy frequency. It's a kind of medicine. We're making medicines out of consciousness. And the thing is, the consciousness medicines communicate to the consciousness of the living force, whether it's a fungus or a mold or whatever, virus. And when consciousness speaks to consciousness, consciousness gets the message. It's a clear channel. It's the channel to do it. Here's another question. Our friend, Ayurvedic doctor, recently had a family trauma. His 8-month-old child died, before his birth. So it was a miscarriage in the 8th month. And he lives life always helping others. So the message for a mother who's lost her baby in this way is to know that it's not her fault, that it's not uncommon, especially for individuals who are at a very high spiritual level, to receive souls into their families who have very little work left to do before they're enlightened. Very little work. Just the little last flop of the wave. That happens. It can happen. And it can happen that 8 months is all it takes. And then that soul is enlightened. And they know that it's a huge sacrifice for the mother. And the mother knows that it's a huge sacrifice for the soul. But it can happen like that. It can happen that the baby only needed 8 months to get enlightened. The message that it's not the baby's fault, the mother's fault, actually came to me when I lost a baby. I miscarried a baby, not at 8 months, only 4 months, but still. And the message was given to the Ayurvedic clinic to give to mothers. And they told me that the message came directly from Maharishi. So he wanted all the mothers to know this. And this was the message, that your baby only needed a few months and then it could be enlightened. And that's the type of baby that comes to people who are on extremely powerful spiritual paths. In our case, we started watching the Ramayana, the story of the Ramayana, about the day of conception, and we saw the last episode, the day of the baby's death. So the Ramayana was the overarching theme of that entire life. Anyway, all our love and compassion goes out to your friend. Okay, so another person says, oh, another lady saying that she laughed when she saw the title of this webinar because her system went out, her digested and fatigue and everything last Sunday, and was out all week. And she feels like it was in preparation for this webinar, lol. Yeah, and also last week, you should know that we were in our last big push through the Saturn K2 conjunction of this year, which was completely designed to bring back old karma. So the old karma, that was, and for a long time, like we're not going to see any more karma for a really long time. So this was probably also part of that, blowing out, taking advantage of those last few days of that conjunction and the amazing and beautiful support of the Devic energies that are present, that were also present with us last Sunday and during that last week to help provide the support system to deal with that karma. So both of those two things. And I hope, may it be that the work that we're doing in this webinar to support the immune system is extremely valuable and uplifts you completely out of that fatigue and situation with the digestion, which leads directly into the next question, which is, this is a lady who has autoimmune condition. We didn't talk that much about autoimmune condition, although you will find I do have some resources, free resources online for that. Autoimmune hepatitis, and would love some energy healing. And also, what is the relationship between hormones, menopause, and autoimmunity, or the immune system? So again, we have some structures at the finer level, more like the astral level of the being, which we inherit, that form the foundation for beliefs, that we lose hormonal strength as we grow older, and that menopause weakens the system somehow. And it's true that during the time, menopause is a very dynamic period. It's a very dynamic time, just as puberty is a very dynamic time. So just being in that period, which can be like a marathon because it can last for years, can draw upon a lot of the body's resources. So some of the body's resources that could be spent creating a more robust endocrine system or immune system or digestion or whatever, they're focusing on the transition that's taking place in the hormonal structure, in the body, the shift away from being of childbearing years. However, it doesn't have to have a deleterious effect overall on the hormones in the immune system. The immune system, when it turns and becomes overly robust, essentially, and attacks the physiology. I'm just taking a little read for this lady. Just moving a little forward into that. And I'm seeing the imbalance sitting mostly in this area here, having to do with ability to hold oneself in highest regard, self-love. Also, it can happen that all the beings that come from the being, source, all the beings come from source, and some beings manifest all the way to physical material, and some beings only manifest to astral, and some beings only manifest to, say, etheric level. When we think, what is a ghost? A ghost is a soul whose whose manifest body only comes up to the etheric level. So viruses, exploitative energies can also do that. And as we've been talking about healing the body and identifying pathogens, one of the things we've been doing is we've been looking at how certain pathogens can manifest in a more subtle way, like the mold that manifests in a body that's kind of like a conglomeration of old ideas and, no longer sort of putrefied or no longer useful beliefs. And that's kind of like the essential body that's behind it. So we deal with that body. And then when we've dealt with that body and from at that level where consciousness is meeting consciousness, it's really easy to make transitions and to change. The physical material level takes a little bit longer to adjust. So what can happen is viruses that have a very kind of exploitative and abusive attitude towards humanity can exist at a very sort of finer level, not so physical manifest. And if they're very robust, if they're very healthy and they're very powerful, when the body meets that, and it will come through the web of life, usually that's how it enters the body, then the body system kicks off, hey, there's an invader. And then the immune system kicks into gear, hey, there's an invader, and starts producing antigens and starts producing, those killer cells get in there and they start looking around for where's the invader and what can we affect here, when in fact they need to be looking not physically but energetically. So when they look physically, when they should be looking energetically, what happens is the body goes into an immune response. And since the pathogen at that point hasn't manifested physically, the body ends up taking the brunt of the immune activity. So what we need, again, we need to bring in the second element and the wisdom. And yesterday there was a big upgrade for heart wisdom. So be sure to watch yesterday's session as well. But as the heart wisdom upgrades, and everybody today gets all the healings from yesterday, you get all of them. As the heart wisdom upgrades, we become, the senses of perception refine, and the finer senses of perception are able to identify the invader no matter what level of manifestation it's at. And then one can identify precisely, this is an astral invader. This invader has an astral body, or this invader is just at the causal level. We're looking at your situation. We'll see where it is. I'll shine my light. We can see, we've got over an hour. And there's one more person question I didn't answer. Oh, and I feel bad because I didn't answer it last night either. So I'm going to email him. I want you to know, you who asked me that question, I will email you an answer for your question. But we will just take a little quick look here and then wrap it up. All right, not what I was expecting, but absolutely fascinating, which was, I was thinking, maybe her invader is at an astral level. No, it's at the emotional and mental levels of the physiology, mental and emotional levels. It's particularly emotional. There's exercise on my website that supports your ability to become very, very self-loving. And I recommend that exercise. It's a freebie. It's under free offerings. You can see it there. But there's a shift that needs to take place in terms of self-identity and self-love. And often they have to go together, because you can say, I love myself. Or you can say to somebody else, I love you. But if the actions don't reflect that, then it's not necessarily, that's not the foundation for a healthy relationship, right? You say, I love you, I love you, I love you, to turn blue. But if the actions are still cruel, then what good is it? So same thing here, that of course we love and respect and care for ourselves, but that breakage has to do with self-identity and one's worth as a being. And that lack of self-worth energy, that goes all the way back to the biological warfare, right? Because one group is like, their lives aren't worth anything. Let's just wipe them out, right? And those are human lives we're talking about there, right? So this thing, it's been sitting in our culture for like hundreds of years, hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. The worth is not founded on one's individual nature. It's founded on the fact that every human being is divinity expressed for the purpose of the evolution of the whole universe. That's the foundation of the worth. When the foundation of the worth takes that, when the sense of self-worth and self-identity takes that form of, or that as its foundation, then upon that, you can build a relationship with the self that is so supportive, that is so beautiful, that is so nourishing, that you won't fall ill. You won't fall ill again. Be sure also, to the same person that I'm talking to, be sure that you're going in the bed in the time of the night when you get the melatonin flush. There's the pineal gland will produce the nice big flow of melatonin. Usually it differs at different times of the year and depending on when the sun sets in your area and all that. But there's a particular time in the evening where the body's producing a lot of melatonin. And if you go in the bed at that time, you will find that the quality of sleep completely different. It's completely different. It's completely nourishing. And one can soak. I also have I was going to say, can soak in waves of self-love all night long. And I was going to say, have a video called The Fountain of Youth. You might want to check that one out too, because that energetic for that energy is in that video. All right. So I hope that answered the question. It was so completely divine and wonderful to have everybody's questions. I'm so, so grateful. And I promise I'll go through everything and make sure that everybody has been satisfied before it's all over. I'm grateful to each one of you and for staying with me even past our time today. Bless your hearts. It was really wonderful. It's just really beautiful. I love you all from the bottom of my heart, and I'm so grateful for the work we do together, and we shall continue, and hopefully our world now shall start benefiting more from the cleansing of some of the deleterious effects of biological warfare over the course of centuries. So that was we did a lot. You guys deserve a rest. Maybe a nice meal. So wishing you all a beautiful weekend. Thank you. See you soon. Bye.